But the last one we're going to have a look at is study abroad and how context and environment may or may not. So this idea that being in a study abroad program is suddenly going to turn you into a fabulous speaker. So I think I've mentioned a couple of times a place called CALA, Center for Language Acquisition Research. So we're going to do a couple of exercises from CALA that we would do if we were about to go on a study abroad to try and give ourselves more. Now, those of you that are online, there are 3 activities, and then you'll also see 2 activities that say suggested answers. So go ahead and do all 3 activities that you see us do and go over before you look at the suggested answers sheet, because I'm going to be giving out the suggested answers sheet here, but we're going to do the activity first. One activity, the first activity that I'm going to give to you, called Discovering Cultural Diversity, that one does not have a suggested answer sheet. So you can just go ahead and print that out or have a look at that right now. And then the second 2 activities we do will have an answer sheet. Okay, so all right, I'm going to give, you're going to do one too. So here's your first activity to make you think about yourself as a cultural being. Yeah, all right, well, I think we've got enough to get started then. So this is the first one. It's called Discovering Your Cultural Identity, and it's the one, those of you that are out there, it's the one with all the circles. So let's get a sense. Let's start with Diego's number 1. What's the first one you thought of?
Curious.
Curious. Okay, and what was your first one, Mark?
Episcopalian.
Episcopalian. And what was your first one? Tell a little bit.
Inquisitive.
Inquisitive. And Shihan?
Korean.
Huh?
I feel out Korean.
Korean, right. And in fact, this is exactly the kind of answers that people get. People most often identify as a thing. So as a Hispanic, Black, Korean, woman, man. So you 2 are very interesting. The 2 that did, yeah. What was your second one, Diego?
Quiet.
Quiet, Mark?
Irish American.
Irish American, that's a common one. Yep, Irish American is often Irish heritage, often 3rd. Yeah, Tolalupe?
Helpful.
Helpful, nice. And Shihan?
Stubborn.
Huh?
Stubborn.
Stubborn. Okay. So we're moving into, all right, and 3rd and 4th, Diego?
Indecisive.
Indecisive.
No 4th.
And what?
No 4th because
No 4th. Oh, because you're indecisive. Mark, couple more.
Texan.
Yeah.
And reader.
Reader, okay. And Tolalupe?
Independent.
Yep.
And loving.
Oh, wow. So you have no identifying national origin, ethnic origin, anything, which is very unusual, actually. Yeah.
That's good. Hot-tempered.
Hot-tempered. Ooh. And your fourth one?
Also active.
Say that again?
Active.
Active. Okay. So most typically they identify as ethnic or gender or so. Let me give you some examples. Hispanic, woman, writer, Black, male, student, parent, sister, Irish heritage, Catholic. So and people don't get down to some of the things that you guys had. Okay, so then you can have a look at the reflection questions. If you had to pick just one circle, what would it be?
I'd say curious.
Curious. And Diego, you had difficulty filling in the 8 circles. What do you think the reason is that you had a problem filling them out?
I mean, I could think of other things that people have called me, but not so much that I
Would call yourself?
don't. Well, I mean, like, smart is something that people always used to describe me, and I don't want to put that because that there are other smarter people. I don't want to claim something that
Oh, interesting.
it's me. So this was a very difficult exercise.
It was a difficult exercise for you. All right. Mark,
Mhm.
how do you didn't have any difficulty filling in your 8 circles?
No, I finished them up. I came up with 8.
So, Mark, you're the one that's lived abroad in interesting circumstances. How might the circles change when you're abroad?
Some of them become less relevant, and some of them become more relevant,
More relevant, yeah.
depending on whether, for example, the Irish American becomes completely moot when I was in the Dominican Republic because the various flavors of European ethnicities are insignificant. If you are light-skinned, you're considered European.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. Spanish, whatever. So that has nothing to do with anything. So that, and there's no Irish American community in the Dominican
Right.
Republic.
Right.
So that becomes meaningless.
Right.
Whereas, like, another thing that I put down was I put down my political identity. I put down socialist,
Right.
which of course is completely, marginal and considered freakish in the United States. But
Right.
when I was in England, junior
Right.
year abroad studying, no one cared because
Right.
even though that's a minority viewpoint there, it's still a large enough segment of society that it's not considered odd or
Yeah, well, and it's not a bad word in
Right,
England,
right.
where it seems to be here. Yeah.
So it just, things become either more or less significant depending on where you are.
Good. So one of the things that happens with study abroad is the more you're able to do that, the more you're able to weigh things up that way, and rather than say, I am this person and I am always this person, the more flexible you are in terms of how you see yourself, the more successful you are, apparently, at study abroad. All right, we're going to try another exercise now. This exercise, for those of you that are at home that are doing these exercises at the same time as us, this is the one with the iceberg on it. In this one, if you have a look at the top, basically it uses the iceberg analogy, which I'm sure you've all seen before, as a way to say culture, the sum of culture is, up front and is sort of somewhat easier to see, and some is quite difficult to see. Like, you can't obviously understand it. So things we observe most have a more fundamental cultural value. Although the iceberg separates culture into visible and invisible elements, these are almost always interrelated. Even trickier is how a visible aspect of culture, so seemingly obvious, such as laughing, can have very different meanings. I'm funny versus embarrassed. All right. So the activity is for you to identify in the ones underneath, which ones you think are on top of the iceberg, on which ones are underneath. So which ones are easy to see, and which ones are problematic. Feel free to talk to each other. All right, so let's see what you've got. Let's do some suggested answers. Give me one that you put on the top, Diego.
I did clothing.
Clothing, yep. Everyone agree? Clothing on top. Mark, one on top.
Top would be rules of politeness.
Oh, interesting, because they put that underneath.
Well, that was one of the ones that I thought was not obvious.
Right.
But the thing is that even though you might not be able to guess, if you transgress, it becomes obvious immediately.
Ah, okay. So why did you put that underneath, Diego?
There's a lot of subtle things, and there's things that people have done to me that even though I consider it rude, I don't let them know. And so, though you're right, if it's bad enough, I'll say, whoa. Like,
Right.
I don't
So-
always do that.
So the guy with the textbook, I have nothing to say, right? So then you have to decide, would a native speaker say, dude, that's so freaking rude? Or would a native speaker just think to themselves, that's the last time I do you a favor? So
It's good. I hadn't thought about it.
yeah, I mean, so that is one of the,
I think I might want to change my answer.
yeah, well, no, I mean, these are, when I bring these around, these are suggested answers, not, but
Right.
but that is one of the issues in which I always think of it as like restaurants. Like I don't know how many of you have watched that stupid restaurant show with the British guy.
Faulty Towers?
No, that's fabulously funny. No, the one where the chef goes into failing restaurants. Gordon Ramsay. Have you seen Gordon Ramsay? So, and he says this to them all the time, and it's true. They say, no one ever complains about my food. But then there's no one in the restaurant, right? So he says, no, because in this country, we don't say this was crappy food. We just don't come back, right? And so it's that kind of thing. Good. Tolalupe, what's one you had on the top?
Degree of eye contact.
Eye contact, yeah, good. Degree of eye contact, yeah, because you can see, you can probably see at some point if you're getting uncomfortable or other people look like they're getting, it's usually you, right? You're getting uncomfortable because people are looking at you too much or, yeah. And Sheehan?
Tipping customs.
Tipping customs, right. They put that on the top too. All right, give me something you had underneath, Sheehan.
Views on quality.
Yeah, that's one that, yeah.
Which?
Views of equality, yeah. Tolalupe, one that you had underneath?
Attitude towards sexuality.
Yes, attitude towards sexuality, yeah. Because in this country, it's so bizarre, right? On the one hand, you get as much porn as you want, but on the other hand, it's a kind of based on a society that was, I'm trying to remember the name of the
Puritan.
Puritan society, and it's absolutely good. Mark, one you had underneath?
I had religious beliefs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though some people make that very obvious, for the most part, it's not.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's absolutely true. It's one of those things, right? They say don't talk about religion and politics because you don't know what you're getting into, right? We pretend that it's fine. Right. And then, Diego, what did you have underneath?
I actually put methods of worship. There's some that are very outward facing, but then there's a lot of the smaller details that people don't share.
Right.
How they, like one thing that I can think of is in Hispanic culture, in Mexico particularly, you'll see people, doing the whole ritual in public, where here in the U.S. it's like, if I think about that, I guess it's because I'm not Catholics, but praying is much more private. And, you do that at home.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I figured like there was more variation there, and I don't know what the other.
They don't agree with you, but I think that's perfectly fine recently.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are their suggested answers of what they would say. So before you leave, the idea is that they try and do some work with you to say, there are things you're going to notice immediately that then, and of course all this is linguistic, right? Because there are things that you will and won't say, or should and shouldn't say. I'm going to give you one more to do. This one's about America, though. So this is going to be interesting for my two completely non-Americans to see if, and in fact, Sheehan, go and sit next to Tolalupe and see if you two can come up with the same thing. So I'm sort of fascinated to see if Diego's Americanized quite enough now. But Mark's like spoken American.
Yeah.
So you've got a sheet there, and what you're going to try and do is interpret what you think the cultural value is behind the saying. So one American saying is, if at first you don't succeed, try again. What's the cultural value that is uniquely American behind that saying? Or not uniquely American, but American. You know, why do Americans say that? So, Tolalupe and Sheehan, you can have a crack at doing this yourself. And then Mark and Diego, we can sort of see if, all right, well, let's take a look. Let's start with the Americans, with number one. If at first you don't succeed, try again. What's American about that?
Perseverance.
Perseverance. Yeah, is that what you guys had?
Perseverance.
Yeah, perseverance. All right, stick to it. We can all get there, right? If you just stick to it. Now it's interesting because in Hungary they had the opposite, which was it's always going to be crap. It really was. That was one of the reasons that I struggled to live there, because it turns out I'm more American oriented. But the general idea was, don't expect things to get any better because they won't. You know, you are stuck where you are stuck, and that is the way life is. You know, yeah, it was fascinating, huh? And it was a little depressing. Yes, yeah. It definitely wasn't my cultural home. Okay, what did you get? Make lemons into lemonade, Sheehan?
I just said pragmatism.
Pragmatism. Okay, what did you guys have?
I-
Oh, sorry.
Well, I didn't have a name for it, but it's like you should turn your adversity to stepping stones, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. What did you guys get?
Make something good out of the bad.
Yeah. Exactly. Make something. Stay positive. Make something good out of the bad. Yeah. Americans, what did you do with make yourself at home?
Hospitality.
Yes. Yes. What else about it?
Informality.
Absolutely. What did you guys get?
I said privacy.
I said hospitality.
Okay, yeah. So what it suggests here, and I'll give you this in a second, is that it means informality, you know, meaning just make yourself at home. But then it says international students often don't really know what that means. Like, because we did have one international student here some time ago, so this is nobody that anyone knows, who was quite a strange individual. And when they came to our house, mine and Sal's house, they just walked in and sat down in one of our chairs. Like literally just walked in the door, took their shoes off and sat down in one of our chairs without, you know, and of course everybody else was just sort of standing around trying to decide, you know, whether or, you know, when we were going to say, please sit, or please, you know, whatever. So, but strictly speaking, if this person had thought make yourself at home was, you know, be like, okay, I'm at home, right?
So that happens also with people who have are, which is my wording here, are on the spectrum
Yes.
very lightly, where they ignore social cues.
Yes.
I very much used to have a friend 100% American
Right.
did the exact same thing.
Right.
It's
Well, because pragmatics is this all comes under pragmatics, of course, and yeah, sociocultural pragmatics is about understanding social cues, right? And one of the ways in which we recognize people on the spectrum is their complete, lack of it. However, what's interesting is you see if it's a non-native speaker, we often interpret it as a cultural difference rather than, and it could just be that they're on the spectrum and they're just as bad in their own country, right? They're just as clueless. All right, what did you get? I'm not going to go through them all. What did you get for the squeaky wheel gets the grease, Shihun and Tolalupe?
Putting effort.
Putting effort, is that what you said?
Mhm.
Okay, what did you guys get?
I don't know if I got this one correctly, but I said that where the problem is, that's where we put our attention.
Wow, you're so nice to each other. Mark, what did you get?
Initiative.
Yeah, initiative. Yes, and that's what they have to. It's good to complain. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease means the more you complain and say that something's wrong, yeah, the more likely they are to fix it, right? Because you're making so much noise. Yeah. And Shihun Tolalupe, what did you get for what's the bottom line? Number 9.
We don't have that. What's the problem?
You got nothing? Oh, fascinating. Okay. What does it mean? What does it mean, Mark and Diego?
I actually was torn between two different ones.
Okay.
Because there's two meanings for that. One is if you're only talking about money,
Right.
what's the bottom line refers to what is the net gain or loss
Yep.
of what's being discussed. So that would refer to materialism.
Yep.
But if you're not talking about money and you're speaking metaphorically,
Yep.
then what's the bottom line is what is the practical result of what's being discussed.
My
So
gosh,
that refers to practicality.
you are such an American. It says focus on results, most often on money. Mark. No, there's nothing wrong with being an American. You are American.
Well,
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean you agree with it.
Well, that's true.
But what's fascinating to me is that you knew exactly what and that these two are like,
Bottom line.
yeah, got nothing. So you can see how, okay, and the last one, what did you guys get, Shihun and Tolalupe, for number 10? What's up?
Interest toward other people.
Say that again?
Interest toward other people.
Oh, that's an interesting one. What did you guys get?
So, hello?
Yeah, obviously it means hello, but what's the underlying?
I don't know.
This is why I picked this one, because I was like,
Is it
huh?
just interest?
No.
I put informality because that did not become a greeting in the United States until the mid-1980s.
Yep.
I'm old enough to remember when that used to mean, before the mid-1980s, that meant what's going on.
Right.
In the sense that is something wrong?
Is something wrong?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
what's
what's-
wrong?
what's going
Yeah.
And it actually became a substitute for hello in the
Yeah.
mid-1980s. A lot of it came from actually music culture, youth culture, hip-hop culture. It
Right.
was like, sup?
Yeah, it's up.
And I remember there was some pushback against that because I remember I went to my undergraduate in the Northeast, and I was up there with another Texan. She was from Houston, and she was just like, "Why does everybody say hello? Say what's up for hello up here? This is so stupid." And I'm just like, "Yeah, I know it's stupid. It's such a stupid thing because you say not much, and it's just like it's just an idiotic exchange. Why are we saying what's up?
Yeah.
For hello? It's just terrible. Why are we we just say hi? How hard is that?
So that's exactly right. They say informality.
Yeah.
So we have a true American, a sort of somewhere in between, and then clueless, right? I'm going to give you out the suggested answers just so you can have a look, and you can look at the ones that, and again, remember, these are suggested answers. They're not, this is not a test, right? Although if you want to pass it, fine count as well. You're about as American as apple pie, Mark. I remember teaching it to my students when I first came here, saying, "What's up? Not much." And they would look at me like, and I'd be like, "I got nothing." I don't know why. But I see the point of their reasoning and yours, which is this sort of constantly trying to go down to an egalitarian pitch, you know, whereas in fact, that's not the reality. In fact, America is hierarchical as any other, but this sort of wanting to be perceived, you know, as everything being informal, you know, which I find kind of really interesting, a really interesting American kind of, and the other thing I find really interesting is the reason I stayed here was this positive affect, this kind of like lemons into lemonade, things can get better, you can achieve more. On the one hand, I find it really super annoying because, you know, people then want to do things that I think, well, you shouldn't be trying to do that. But on the other hand, it's also such a relief from a sort of relentless attitude, certainly in Hungary when I was living there, and to an extent in England, of like, well, what makes you think you're any good and you can do it, you know? So it's interesting where I have these. Now, this is from a book. All these exercises you just did are from a book that I've given you the reference there in case any of you have children who are about to go abroad, or you yourself are interested in it. This is Andrew Cohen, who is part of the Carla Institute at Minnesota. It's a really interesting way, and essentially what they're saying is, you know, the more flexible that you can be in terms of understanding how much your own behavior, including your own linguistics behavior, is controlled by what you consider to be the proper sociocultural context, the more sort of entrenched you are, it's less likely, it seems, that you will be able to get the most out of interacting in a second language culture. And this is their way, their response to that then is they've written a few books where you can do these exercises before you send your kids or your students out there to try and get them to realize that they're sort of looking at different things. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I get a lot of them. It turns out I'm pretty entrenched. One of the reasons that I was bad in Hungary probably was whenever I do these things, and I've done quite a few now in SLA context, it doesn't surprise me that I wasn't any good at living in a second language environment. Okay, so then last but not least, you have your reading post, discussion prompt, reflect on your experience in studying abroad. If you don't have experience, try and find a friend or relation who does. If you can't find a friend or relation who does, you can just reflect on what we did today. In what ways do you think personal factors such as the ones described here may have affected your language learning? Okay, so personal factors described here meaning how you respond to people, how willing you are to be flexible in terms of your responses and approaches to people and so on. All right. Any questions, comments, issues? Yes.
Mark, what did you get for number 4 and number 8?
You want what? I'm sorry?
From the last exercise.
Oh, number 4, number 8.
Don't blame me.
You want to ask our
Yank,
Apple Pie American?
yes.
Okay.
Number 4, I got individualism and the don't blame me.
Yeah.
And I don't really like.
That one?
Yeah, well, I actually, I don't like the extreme individualism of the United States. I think a lot of people don't take responsibility for the collective situation.
Right.
It's something that I disagree with, actually. But that's what I put before, was individualism.
Yeah, which is basically, they say we might emphasize individual responsibility, but in fact, you know, we don't want to take any more individual responsibility than the next person does. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's socially expected to take responsibility for oneself.
Right.
But
Good,
there's
Mark.
this
Yeah.
lack of responsibility for the effect that one
The
actually
collective.
have.
Yeah, on the collective. Yes, I agree
That's
with you.
actually weird about us.
Yeah,
Because
that's
in most
true.
cultures, people have a more, you know, the idea of the collective and what we do affects everybody. that's considered normal.
Yeah,
Whereas here,
it's true.
like, no, I can, you know, burn things in my
You
yard.
know, it's true. It's
Yeah,
absolutely
smoke
true.
everywhere and-
And actually, to my shame, I think it's one of the reasons I like it. Because here in Texas, it's really full on. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you know, in other places I've lived, particularly in urban environments, I guess, it's like there is some of that, but you still bear some communal responsibility.
Right.
But in Texas, particularly rural Texas,
Yeah.
it's entirely up to you what you do and don't do, and what you burn down and don't, to the point where I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we had a burn ban because we had maybe 3 years ago, we had no rain. It was awful. And hay, I remember it because the cost of hay for the horse went up because there was no hay. And there was a neighbor and he was burning. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to take down our house because it was so dry. I was like, he's going to, you know, I wanted Sal to go over there and say, you're not allowed. And Sal's like, yeah, not on your life. This guy's got a gun. No, but yeah, it's fascinating. Here in certain regions, it seems to be really kind of, hardcore.
Yeah, it is. I actually don't want to get off into digression because I know we don't want to leave, but
No, that's fine.
I think I think a lot of it actually goes back to the Ulster Scots and their influence on Southern culture.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I don't mean that in a hostile way. I respect
Right,
culture, but
right.
that extreme individualism,
Yeah.
it had to come from somewhere.
It did. It does have to come from somewhere. It is really hardcore down here.
Yeah.
I'm quite surprised. And your other one was?
Number 8. It's no big deal.
Resilience.
Yeah, you have resilience, and they have emphasis on downplaying problems, avoiding conflict. Oh, so they
Pretty
mean,
close.
yeah, well, they mean it's no big deal, like, don't worry about it, right? Don't worry about it. Although they say it varies greatly by region. I mean, that sort of goes back to the thing we were saying about you don't call people out on stuff. You just, you know, so sorry, Sal, if you ever see this, but he's a horror show in things like restaurants. He's very un-American. He wants to call people out all the time. He wants to say, you know, but that isn't right, and that's not what you said, and that's, you know, and I'm like, that's not the way they do it here. What you do is you just say, oh no, it's no, you know, they say, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't give you cream cheese in your cream cheese sandwich, and you say, oh, it's no big deal, you know, and but then you don't go back again, right? But you don't sit there and say, yeah, and why didn't you? And where's the chef? I want to see him. And are you going to give me my money back? I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but what do you think?
Yeah, it depends on how much money you're paying.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like if you're in a cheap place, it's just like if what you got was close to what you ordered, okay.
Right.
Whereas if you're in an expensive place, you're like, no, I wanted 8 capers on my pizza and not 7. You know,
Right.
it's different.
Yeah, I don't know. So yes, what do you think, Diego?
I think I'm a bad American.
We need more men.
Well, I mean, as we say, these are obviously, please don't email me and tell me that you're not that kind of American. I know there are many different kinds of Americans. That's not the point, but it is true that we, some people just, it's the same as this idea we talked about phonetic coding ability. Some people just seem to adapt to things better than other people, right? For all kinds of personal reasons, which is what they mean by this maximizing study abroad. Context doesn't necessarily change everything. You know, sending your kid for a year or a semester to Spain doesn't necessarily change their view on the world of second language learning, you know, because if they're inflexible about it, they'll just spend the whole time following their little friends around talking English, right? As I told you before, my ITAs, my international teaching assistants in Florida, they spent all their time together. They answered the lab phone in Chinese. They went to Chinese churches. They went to Chinese stores, you know. So just because they were getting their PhD in America for 5 years didn't necessarily change all of them. I'm not saying this happened with all of them, but, you know, you can be in that environment and it doesn't, you know, do what it needs to do. All right, any other? Well, thanks very much, everybody. This was fun. Next week we do instructed SLA and then we are done. Yeah.